They still talk about that scorched morning on the edge of Sand Gulch, when the wind carried more dust than breath, and old Tom Weller came riding slow into town with a shape slumped behind him, barely held to the mule by an old cavalry blanket and sheer will. He didn't say much. He never did. Just tipped his hat at Mrs. Bellamy outside the general store, nodded once at the boys loitering near the water trough, and rode on toward his cabin at the edge of Rattlesnake Ridge. The mule's hooves clopped with a steady rhythm, but the figure it carried made no sound at all. Not a moan, not a whimper. Just a girl, limp, bloodied, and caked in dirt, like something dragged halfway out of hell. When Sheriff Denton finally caught up, breathing heavy and red in the face, Tom was already pouring water into a chip basin, muttering to himself like always. The girl lay on his bed, wrapped in one of his old shirts, a fever blazing through her like wildfire through brush. "You can't keep her here, Tom," the sheriff said, glancing at her with suspicion, as if a whisper might wake the devil inside her. Tom didn't turn. "Ain't yours to decide. She might be outlaw, branded, could bring trouble. She's half dead. Trouble's already been through." The sheriff looked like he had more to say, but his words caught in the heat. He left, wiping sweat from his neck, and didn't come back. Tom worked through the night, pulled splinters from her back, washed her wounds with whiskey, cut the barbed twine from her wrists, and burned it in the stove. She cried out once, not from pain, but from something deeper, a sound like memory, like loss. By morning, word had spread through the town, like a kicked anthill. Saloon girls whispered it over gin. Ranch hands spat it with their chewing tobacco. Old Weller brought back a wild one, they said, dragged her in like a corpse and set her up in his shack. Some claimed she was part of the Sanders gang. Others said she was cursed, a banshee escaped from some Apache tale. The kids weren't allowed near the cabin, and the preacher called for prayer. Tom ignored them all. Days passed. The girl fought her fever like a soldier. When she did wake, her eyes were cracked and distant, her mouth dry, her body trembling. She didn't speak. Not right away. Just watched the ceiling with eyes that had seen too much, too fast. Tom left broth by her side, a canteen of clean water. She drank when he wasn't looking. One night, a storm rolled in from the hills, dark and sudden. Thunder cracked the sky, and Tom found her trying to crawl out the front door on her elbows, teeth gritted, eyes wild. "Not safe," she gasped. "They're coming. They'll burn it all." He lifted her gently, carried her back to the bed. "Ain't no one burning nothing tonight," he said. She looked up at him then, eyes sharp behind the sweat. "Why'd you bring me here?" Tom paused. The storm rumbled behind him like a warning. "Because someone should have," he said, and left it at that. Her name came later, whispered like a secret she didn't trust herself to tell. "June," she said one morning as the sun broke through the window slats. "Just June." Tom nodded. "I'll take that." He didn't ask for more. Didn't need it. Names were just the start of things, and he could see hers had a long trail behind it, full of blood and regret. She started moving more by the fourth day, sitting up, watching him with a wary kind of gratitude. She watched how he chopped wood, how he poured coffee slow and steady, how he never raised his voice. And he watched her, too, out of the corner of his eye, how she'd flinch at sudden sounds, how her fingers trembled when she tried to hold a spoon. The townsfolk hadn't stopped talking. Some rode out near the cabin, watching from a distance, like she was a sick wolf. They didn't want too close to the herd. Tom didn't wave, didn't shout, just stood on the porch with his rifle across his arms. By the end of the week, the girl, June, had spoken more. Small things. "Thank you. Can I help?" But one morning she said something different, something that made the air turn cold despite the sun. "They had my brother," she said. "We tried to get away. He didn't make it." Tom stopped tying his boots. Waited. "They branded me," she continued. "Said I was theirs. Property. Like a horse or a thing. I killed one. Then I ran." Tom nodded slowly. "And they're still looking. They won't stop." He stood, loaded his rifle. "Let him come," he said, like he was talking to no one in particular. That night, he sat on the porch as the wind blew dry across the ridge. Behind him, June rested in the bed she no longer needed help climbing into. The town still whispered. The sheriff still hadn't returned. But something had shifted. The girl who came half dead was no longer dying, and the man who once wandered the graveyard with nothing but ghosts for company had found something worth guarding again. The desert was quiet, but it was listening. Something was coming. And this time, Rattlesnake Ridge wasn't going to be caught looking the other way. June did not ask for pity, and Tom Weller never offered it. By the second week, she was back on her feet, wrapped in a borrowed shirt, her arms thinner than they should have been, her eyes sharper than anyone's in town. She walked like a woman learning her own bones again, steady but watchful, testing each step like the ground might vanish beneath her. Tom fixed her a stool near the stove, and she spent her days carving wood or helping patch the old roof. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it carried weight. And every night before dusk, she'd climb the ridge behind the cabin and stare northward, toward the land where the sky grew pale and the dirt turned to stone. Tom didn't follow. He didn't ask questions. He knew that silence could hold a person together better than answers. But the silence didn't last. It was the 13th night when 3 riders came through Sand Gulch, kicking up dust and swagger. Tall men, broad-shouldered, with faces like cracked leather and eyes that never stopped moving. One of them wore a wide-brimmed hat that covered a scar from ear to jaw. Another had a toothpick carved from bone that never left his mouth. The third said nothing, just carried a rifle across his back and a coil of rope like it meant something. They stopped at the saloon and asked about a girl. Quiet-like at first, polite even. But when polite didn't get them anywhere, they started making promises. Ugly, violent promises. The kind that sent the barkeep into the back room and made Miss Lottie, the oldest saloon girl in Sand Gulch, start sharpening the knife she kept in her boot. Sheriff Denton knew better than to call himself brave, but he knew trouble when it came smiling. He stepped out with his badge and a warning, and came back with a split lip and a message. "She's got a bounty on her," he told Tom the next morning, his voice stiff. "Sanders' gang want her alive. They say she stole from them, shot one of their own, took something important." Tom didn't flinch. "Did she?" "She ain't said." Denton muttered. "But they've put out word. Whoever harbors her, they're fair game too." Tom looked at the sheriff's bruised mouth and said nothing, just walked back to the cabin and shut the door behind him. June was peeling potatoes, her sleeves rolled to the elbow. She didn't turn when he came in. "They're here, aren't they? They're skinned." She nodded once, slow and resigned. "They won't leave." Tom sat down across from her, his fingers rough against the table's edge. "You stole something," he said, not as an accusation but a simple truth. June's eyes flicked to his. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she reached under her shirt and pulled out a small pouch, no bigger than a man's palm, tied with faded ribbon. She placed it gently on the table. Tom didn't open it. "It's not gold," she said. "Not maps. Not deeds. It's a letter. A name. My brother's real name. My family's." Tom finally looked up. "They took everything. Burned our home. Said we were squatters. Said my little brother was too young to matter. They laughed when I begged. So I waited. I watched. I found where they hid their papers, where they kept the truth they didn't want the law to see." "And you ran with it." "I ran with proof," she said. "So even if I didn't make it, someone could know. Someone could tell it right." Tom looked at the pouch again, then slowly pushed it back toward her. "Then we make sure you live long enough to tell it." That night, Tom oiled his rifle and checked the traps he'd laid along the ridge. June watched him, leaning against the post with arms crossed tight. "You don't have to stand for me," she said. "I ain't," he replied. "I'm standing for the kind of world where someone like you ought to have a chance." June didn't smile, but something in her shoulders eased. The next day, the 3 riders came farther, past the church, past the general store, right up to the trail leading to Tom's cabin. They didn't dismount, just stared, waiting. Tom stood on the porch, rifle resting against one knee. He didn't blink. The man with the bone toothpick called out, "We ain't here to kill an old man. Just want the girl." Tom didn't move. "She's ours," the one with the scar added. "She took something that's got value. More in her life. Tom's voice came low and slow. Ain't your decision what she's worth? They spat in the dirt and turned their horses, but not before Scarface said, You got one day. Then we stop a skin. Tom didn't go back inside right away. He stood watching the horizon until the last dust trail vanished. Inside, June sat at the table, the pouch still in front of her, untouched. They'll come with more, she said. Tom nodded. Let 'em. For a long time, neither spoke. The wind outside rose into a dry, moaning whistle. Then June said, very quietly, They left me for dead. Laughed when I crawled away. But I didn't die. Tom looked at her. Not as a wounded girl, not anymore. Something colder had settled behind her eyes. Something that had outlasted pain. No, he agreed. You didn't. The lantern flickered between them, shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, the desert waited. And somewhere beyond the ridge, Death rode on horseback. But inside that cabin, life was getting ready to fight back. Dawn crept in red and ragged. A wind had risen in the night, dry and stinging, as if the desert itself had tasted blood on the air. From the ridge above Tom Weller's cabin, smoke coiled in the sky. Not fire, not yet, but the promise of it. Riders were gathering. Not 3 anymore. Closer to 10. Tom watched them from the ridge, glassing their movements with the spyglass he'd once used in the war. They'd set up camp behind the old rock wall by Widow's Pass, where the canyons folded in on themselves and gunfire could echo for hours. Smart place. Strategic. These men weren't just outlaws. They were trained, or at least seasoned by too many killings. Behind him, June stepped quietly. She was dressed in trousers now, her hair bound back, a revolver belted at her waist. Her skin had color again, though not warmth. She didn't ask what he saw. She already knew. 3 of them came last night, she said, her voice steady. While you were on watch, I heard boots. Saw one near the corral. Tom didn't turn. What happened? They left. Maybe testing our nerves. Maybe mapping the land. Tom nodded, lowering the spyglass. They'll come tonight. Sundown. Then we don't wait. He glanced at her then. There was no panic in her. Not even that shaking edge most folk had before a fight. Just resolve, worn smooth and deadly quiet. Tom had seen men march into cannon fire, with less surety. Back at the cabin, they packed quickly. June retrieved the pouch from the corner where it had stayed, wrapping it in cloth and tying it under her shirt. Tom pulled boards off the root cellar, where he'd stashed powder, old shells, and 2 lanterns with half-spilled kerosene. It wasn't much, but it didn't have to be. They didn't talk about what they'd do if it failed. By high noon, Tom had laid out traps along the ridge, tripwires strung with bells, and deeper in, little pits dug fast and covered with scrub. June climbed the watch tree near the back bluff and carved a signal in the bark, a simple cross through a circle. She said it meant endure in her family's tongue. Tom didn't ask which tongue. She hadn't said much about her people, only that they'd lived where the river bends south and the corn grows tall, land now fenced and burned. As the sun dropped low, the air turned still. Even the crickets quieted. Sand Gulch lay 5 miles off, unaware or too afraid to act. Sheriff Denton had stopped by once more that morning with his hat in his hands and guilt in his eyes. They got numbers, Tom, he'd said, low and regretful. This ain't your fight. Tom had looked at him long and hard. It is now. Denton had ridden off, leaving silence in his wake. Now, as dusk painted the cliffs in bruised gold and violet, the first gun cracked like a whip. A warning shot. Then hooves. Fast. Dozen or more. Coming up the ridge, like a storm breaking. Tom and June were already waiting. From his perch behind the boulders, Tom fired the first round. It dropped one rider clean. Horse spooked and bolted, dragging the body a few feet before detaching. The outlaws broke formation, scattering for cover. Dust rose, thick and choking. June, from the flank, fired 2 shots that clipped another man's shoulder and tore through a saddlebag. She ducked, reloaded, and moved. Always moving. The traps did their work. A rider's horse stumbled into the pit near the scrub and threw him. Another triggered a wire that sent bells screaming into the canyon air, alerting June, who rolled and came up firing. The man barely had time to yell. Still they came. Tom took a hit to the leg. Grazing, but enough to slow him. June pulled him back behind the rocks. Breath quick, but eyes locked forward. She fired again. Then again. Her shots didn't miss. You ever shoot like this before? Tom grunted, binding his leg. I've hunted men worse than them, she said simply. A lull broke the noise. For a moment, the canyon went quiet. Smoke drifted in the low light. Groans from the wounded echoed faintly. Then a voice rose. Scarface. Girl, he called out. You can't run again. You ain't gonna make it this time. June stood slowly, just enough for her silhouette to show against the dying sun. I didn't run the first time, she called back. You just weren't fast enough to finish the job. Another shot rang out. Too far left. June didn't flinch. Tom watched her, saw it then. The steel in her, the fire. She wasn't fighting to live. She was fighting because this was her reckoning. They came again, all at once. A final rush. June met them at the bottleneck, where the ridge narrowed. Two more fell before they could see her clearly. Tom dragged himself behind her, firing once, twice. Then his rifle jammed. Scarface broke through the dust first. Rifle raised. Grin splitting his cracked face. June didn't hesitate. Her revolver thundered once. He dropped like stone. The last of the riders scattered, leaderless and bleeding. One by one, they faded into the dark, chased by the weight of their own failure. June stood over Scarface's body, breathing hard, blood spatter on her cheek, her hand still firm. Tom reached her side and sat heavily on a rock. They'll come back. June nodded, lowering the revolver. Then we'll be ready. Smoke still curled in the sky behind them, but the wind had shifted. It no longer carried death. It carried something quieter, heavier, justice. The rains came 2 days after the last shot was fired. Not heavy, but steady, enough to wash the blood from the stones and soften the scorched earth where the outlaws had fallen. The ridge was quiet now. Just wind, birds, and the creak of saddle leather as Tom Weller rode into Sand Gulch with June behind him, her face half-shadowed beneath a borrowed hat. No one said a word at first. Folks peeked through curtains, stepped halfway out of shops, then froze. The girl they'd mocked, whispered about, pitted. She was upright, walking slow but proud, with a rifle strapped to her back, and the same coat she'd been found in flapping in the breeze like a banner. Tom moved like a man carrying pain in his bones, his leg bandaged tight, but he tipped his hat to every eye that dared meet his. At the general store, little Eli Booker ran to them. He stopped short of June and stared up at her with wide, curious eyes. You the lady what killed the outlaw chief? He asked. June looked down, then knelt. No, I just made sure he didn't hurt nobody else. Eli blinked. My ma says you're meaner than a snake. June smiled, thin, amused, but not unkind. Only to snakes. He laughed, then wrapped his small arms around her waist without warning. June stiffened, unsure what to do, then rested her hand gently on the back of his head. From the porch of the saloon, Miss Addie, who'd once told Tom the girl was probably cursed, cleared her throat and stepped forward. She carried a small tin of cornbread wrapped in cloth. You look like you could use a meal, she said. June rose slowly. I could. Addie nodded, handed it over, then hesitated. We was wrong about you. Tom stepped forward, but June touched his arm. No, she said softly. They weren't. They were just scared. I was too. Later, in the churchyard where 6 plain graves marked the resting place of the outlaws they'd buried, Sheriff Denton stood beside Tom. June was sitting near the well, speaking with a few children, her back to them. She laughed at something one of them said, a real laugh, surprised and light. I've seen war, Denton said. Seen women pull children from fire, stand down drunks twice their size. But I never seen what she did up there on that ridge. Tom didn't speak. Denton turned. What'll she do now? Don't know, Tom said. She's not running. That's a start. That evening, the church bells rang for the first time since spring. Folks gathered slow, unsure but willing. June came with her sleeves rolled and a dish in her hands. She helped set tables. She mended a child's torn sleeve. She listened to stories about rain-wrecked crops and cattle lost to fever. And they listened to her. She told them of her people, not all of it, not the pain, not yet, but enough to explain the fire in her. She spoke of a brother taken in the night, of learning to shoot before she learned to braid her own hair. She didn't ask for pity. She gave none. It was little Mary Keene who said it first. She tugged at June's dress and said, "Can I call you Mama now?" The whole room went still. June froze. Mary looked up with wide, honest eyes. "You fixed my doll. You made Jimmy stop pulling my hair. You make us feel safe." June crouched down. Her voice came out small, like it was pulled from somewhere long buried. "I ain't nobody's mama." Mary shook her head. "You are to us." Then another voice chimed in. Then another. Eli, Jenny, Tommy Dean. One by one, they came to her, arms around her legs, hands clutching her skirt, laughing, some crying. They called her Mama. Not in mockery, not in jest, in hope. In the days that followed, Tom watched June change without ever really changing. She still kept a rifle under her cot. She still rose early and walked the perimeter. But now she taught the older girls how to shoot straight and the boys how to track and forage without waste. She planted seeds behind the chapel, helped rebuild the schoolhouse door. She wasn't a ghost anymore. One morning, she rode up to the ridge alone. Tom followed half a mile behind, keeping distance. When he caught up, she was standing over Scarface's grave. "You ever gonna tell me who he was to you?" he asked. June didn't answer right away. Then, a shadow. From before. "I thought he was dead." "Guess he thought the same about you." She nodded. "We're both right now." They stood in silence, the wind stirring the dust at their feet. "You gonna stay?" he asked. "I don't know." "They need you." She looked out over the land, golden and wide and full of hard memories. "And you?" Tom shrugged. "I'll manage, but I wouldn't mind seeing you around come spring." She looked at him, soft now. No fire, just a flicker of warmth, not born from pity or survival. Something human. "I might stay till the planting's done," she said. "See how the seeds turn out." He smiled. They rode down together as the sun rose behind them, casting long shadows across the trail. The smoke was gone now. So was the fear. But the name they gave her would stay. Mama.